Hospital porters, pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Panwo TV. Right, I am at Culham in Oxfordshire, and that there is Didcot Power Station. Now then, this film is actually a follow-up to a film I made a couple of years ago called Freikraft. F-R-E-I-K-R-A-F-T. That is German. It's a German word, and the word actually means, if any of you speak German, free energy. Freikraft. It's a good word, I think. I thought it was such a good word I'd use it in the title, even though I'm not German. That there is Didcot Power Station. If you look on Google Earth, you'll see it. If you go to a map of Didcot, you can't miss it because it's a big, horrible, smelly hole in the middle of South Oxfordshire. It's an absolutely disgusting place. Sorry if you live in Didcot, I'm just being honest. But there's a bit of wind up, so we'll see if this new windshield works now. Should do. Now, if you remember, in the first part of Freikraft, I actually did a film near that power station. I actually filmed myself on a railway bridge near that power station. Thanks to Bardo for doing the camera in that one. And then on part two, I was on the train back, and you see, I couldn't get to Culham because the inconvenience of the trains, which is the problem. But I did say, what I did was I planned to film out the window of the train. Unfortunately, it didn't work because I misjudged exactly where I was on my journey. So I filmed just before we got into Oxford Station. Apologies for that. But basically, you know, my original plan was to come here and film where I am now in Culham, and then go back and do part three, you know, where it was in the garden at my brother's house. It used to be my dad's house, now my brother's. But it never panned out. Because obviously, like, that problem with part two. So I think I let you guys down a little bit, and I'm sorry about that. So this is kind of like a Freikraft addendum, if you like. I'm sort of like trying to make up for what I didn't do before. And as you see, is Didcot Power Station, as I said. Now, and there's a lot of irony here. If you want to go to Google Maps and check out where we are, you can. There's a big railway line running down south between Oxford and Didcot. I'm just on the bridge over the railway line, and there is the railway line, as you see. And the sun's very bright at the moment. God blimey. What is it that makes people want to go jogging? I honestly don't know. I can't believe it. I mean, I managed to stay perfectly fit with a six-pack, and I never go jogging. Right, that's where I am based. I'm at Culham. The actual village of Culham is about a few miles in that direction, where the jogger's gone. I hope he's not jogging all that way. I'm actually near the Culham laboratories. That's where I am right now. See, because there's a lot of, as I said, there's a lot of irony here. Its full name is, if I remember, the Centre for, what's it called? The Centre. What does CCFE stand for? I wrote it down here. Where did I write it down? Damn it! Should make better notes. Oh, where are we? Sorry about this. Bear with me. Just to sing to yourself while you're waiting for me to flick through my notes. Yeah, it's Didcot Power Station. It's CCFE, the Centre for. Well, basically, it's a place where they're arranging. They do research into nuclear fusion. We'll find out in a minute. Anyway, basically, as I was saying, this is all about energy. And as I said, the irony is, I'll explain the irony in a minute. But that's Didcot Power Station. Now that is a coal-fired power station. Now, there's a lot of talk about power stations, right? It charges the national grid. Now the national grid, what is it? Basically it's this network of huge circuits of high power lines. And we see them here. These are coming in and out of that power station there. The Didcot Power Station. And they go basically these stretch all over the country. You know, and this is the national grid. And basically the national grid is a network of these wires. They're split into substations. The substations send electric mains to the homes. and you switch on your kettle and you boil a cup of tea like I did in my film about Martin Fleischmann dying. That's how you get your electricity, basically. This network, this huge network of circuits, is charged at various points by these power stations here. What it basically does, it's quite simple actually. It's a huge fire, a huge furnace fueled by coal, not British coal, because Margaret Thatcher shut down all the British coal mines in the 1980s, if you remember that strike. But coal from other countries where it's cheaper. In this case, it's Russia, I think, is the country which supplies most of Didcot's coal. It's ground down into powder. It's fed into the furnace where it burns. It heats a boiler full of water. The water boils, turns to steam. The steam runs through a turbine. You have a steam turbine system. It runs through the turbine spins a dynamo, and the dynamo charges the national grid. And there's many of these power stations all over the country. Right. The disadvantages of coal is that it is dirty. It's very dirty. It creates these huge clouds. Well, not the steam. The steam coming out of the cooling tower isn't the problem. That's just steam. But the tall tower in the middle is the exhaust for the furnace. See, the cooling towers are simply there. All they do is they take the steam from the turbines, they run it through cooling, they cool it down till it condenses. That's what those towers do. And it falls into a special pool which pumps it back to the boiler and the circuit begins again. It's that tall one there, that tall thin tower there, that tall thin chimney. That's giving off the fumes from the coal. And that is it's highly toxic material in there. There's carcinogenic agents, things that can give you cancer. Various other kinds of chemicals in the soot that damage the environment. Please note, I'm not mentioning the big one, and that is the one most people go for, is CO2. I personally don't think CO2 is harmful. I think that's a big subject, but basically climate change, man-made climate change, is a load of bollocks, and it's designed to control us and to tax us and to bring in more and more laws. It's a bit of an eyesore, actually, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, sorry, I've still got it on Zoom. It's a bit of a nose sore as well. In fact, it stinks to high heaven. You can smell it for miles around, and it's you can actually smell it. You can't smell it. You can see it in Oxford. It's just an eyesore and a nose sore. So it's both. Now, it's dangerous as well. I mean, coal mining is still one of the most dangerous jobs you can do. In terms of disease, accidents, things that happen to miners. A miner's life expectancy is way lower than national average, especially in foreign countries where, you know, where safety concerns are much lower. Of course, in Britain, their safety regulations are much higher. So I think that's one of the reasons they shut them down. Now, so with all those health risks associated with coal, a lot of people, you know, in the last 50 years, we've had a different kind of system. We've had nuclear power stations, and there's a few of those. There's, of course, there's Sellafield and, you know, and places like that, and Trowsfynydd in Wales, various these power stations. There's talk about converting that into a nuclear power. So it'd be a nuclear power there instead of coal. And old George Monbiot, that spindly little twit, as Alex Jones calls him. And I don't often agree with Alex Jones, but I do in this case. Wants to turn that into nuclear power. There's a train there, see? Train. They always sound their horns when they go through here. Just for the train spotters among you. I don't know how many of you are train spotters. I mean, I'm not. Am I? Am I? Thank you. Right, nuclear fission. I'm just going to take a walk down this way towards the place where I'm heading. Nuclear fission is where it's been around for about 50 years, and this is where basically they take rods of heavy metal, plutonium, uranium, various isotopes of uranium, and they put them together so they reach what's called a critical mass, which is just like in a nuclear explosion. Eventually they reach a point where the atoms there's so many of because these are unstable atoms, the various particles flying off the atom hit other atoms and they split them. And if that goes on, it causes a chain reaction which results in an explosion. Now an explosion is prevented by mixing the uranium with other substances to dampen down the effect. And so all you get is, instead of an explosion, you get hot heat. It glows very hot, like a kettle's elements. Like the elements of a kettle, except it's not fueled by electricity, it's fueled by the nuclear reactions within the fuel rod, as it's called. They have these rods. Now that is how the nuclear reaction works and how the heat is generated. Apart from that, the rest of it's very simple. The heat is generated, and once that's done, the rest of the power station workings are very conventional, and just like that one, you simply get the heat from the fuel boils water. The water goes through a turbine. The turbine, spins a dynamo, charges the national grid, and the water is condensed afterwards. So no different to that. The only difference is the source of the heat. It's not a coal furnace, it's a nuclear fission pile. Now the disadvantages of that are well known to everybody. It's extremely dangerous. You only have to look at Fukushima. I mean, this is just one example of many accidents across the world. Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, and in Britain we had Windscale, which took place at the Sellafield power station in the 60s. So we got a lot of so there's a lot of risks associated with nuclear fission. Also, once the fuel is used up, the nuclear reaction in the uranium fuel rods eventually converts it to plutonium, which is highly toxic. In fact, it's one of the most poisonous it's the most poisonous substance known to man, and it has to be basically buried for the remainder of its half-life, which is about 1 million years or something ridiculous like that. It's really it has to be buried and kept away from the environment, away from people, away from nature. Otherwise, it would kill everything. And also, if it's stolen, it can be stolen by terrorists, or by other, well, I just say governments. Governments are terrorists who will turn it into weapons. It can be used to make nuclear bombs. Right, so let's continue on our little trip here. Now, as I said, this is the national grid. These power stations, they go to substations like that one. They see that substation there. That is actually that's a substation. I think it powers the laboratory we're going to see, the CCFE. 4 letters whose names I memorised them last night. I can't bloody remember them. Oh, I'll come to it in a minute. I don't leave loose ends tied up in my films. So let us continue along here. Right. Now this is actually where I'm heading now. You see, these buildings here are part of the Cullen Laboratories. It used to be called the Rutherford Appleton Laboratory. It's now called the CCFE. Which I'm going to find out what that means later on. Now there's first, before we go on, I'll have to explain the downside of the national grid system. This is why many sort of like new age types or hippie types, or even I don't use that in a derogatory sense. I've got a lot of respect for those people. They believe that the solution to electricity is micro-generation. This is where people generate their own electricity through their own generators, their own wind turbines, their own solar panels on their houses and other things. That's because the reason is that this national grid, even though it's enormously powerful, it's very inefficient, and that's because of resistance. Right? There's no such thing as a superconductor at room temperature. You can't have that at normal room temperature. Okay. You have what happens when electricity runs through a circuit? You get resistance to that current, inevitably, and the resistance to that current leads to a loss of power, and the larger your circuit, the more resistance there's going to be. Now, different materials have different levels of resistance. Shut up, train. Don't interrupt me. This is a Panwo TV. Be quiet. But different materials have different levels of resistance. Now, silver is the best conductor in the world, but of course silver is very expensive. Copper is the next best, so they use copper in these wires. Incidentally, silver is silver conducts heat and electricity very, very well. And this is why there's no such thing as a silver teaspoon. Did you know that? No, there's no such thing as a silver teaspoon. The reason is, if you try to stir tea with a silver spoon, you'd burn your fingers, because the heat shoots straight up the cup, no resistance, up into the top of the spoon, burn your fingers. Okay, we're going to carry on along here now. That there, I'll just zoom in, that there is the laboratory, the CCFE. I'll explain more about what that is in a minute. But I think by the time this film is finished, you'll understand there's an irony with that being present just a few miles from Didcot Power Station. Now, as I said, there's a lot of resistance on a large circuit like the National Grid. A lot of the power is actually lost to this resistance, even with copper wires. Doesn't matter what you do, you're going to get resistance on a circuit. Except superconductors, which superconductivity is when you cool something down to a very low temperature, and its level of resistance drops to almost nothing. But you can't cool these wires to that level, even on a cool winter's day. And that's the downside of the National Grid. Now, the downside, of course, of electricity generation of any kind is, of course, it has to be paid for. Because you need fuel to run a generator, whatever it is, whether it's the coal, whether it's the nuclear fission pile, it costs money. It costs money to mine it, it costs money to grind it up, it costs money to put it in a furnace, it costs money to burn it, it costs money to run the power station. It's with nuclear fission, it costs money to, like I say, mine the uranium, keep the uranium. What's that? Smart water. Forensic system? Oh, God. A lot of security around here. It costs money, and of course that money has to be paid for by us. And in Frycraft, I actually show you a copy of my electricity bill. And you'll see it. Now, every single electricity user in the world has one of those. You send a bill, you have to pay. Now that's a substation, I think, for the laboratory, and it uses a lot of electricity, and I'll explain why in a minute. Now, of course, there are alternatives to those. I mean, we hear a lot about them now, and you see the big wind turbines dotting across the country, springing up everywhere. Monbiot's monsters, I call them. They're not very nice to look at, and what's more, they kill bats, as David Bellamy rightly pointed out. CCTV in operation, that's right. David Bellamy rightly pointed out they kill bats. Solar panels, again, I mean, technically, people sometimes say these things are free energy. Yeah, they have a lot of overhead. I mean, there's no such thing as free energy as such. There's just very, very cheap energy, and there's more expensive energy. And what I'm going to talk about later is the extremely ultra cheap energy. But in this case, in terms of the solar power, in terms of solar energy, there we are. You see now, I mean, the security is quite tight actually for a laboratory. In fact, if you go around to the entrance, they've got armed guards there. What we're talking about with where was I? Yeah, it's the very, very cheap energy. I'm going to talk about the ultra cheap energy. Now, the thing about wind and solar power is it's technically the energy generation doesn't cost anything because it's coming from a free resource. It's coming from the wind and the sun. But of course, you've still got to build the solar panels. You've still got to maintain them. You've got to maintain the windmills or the wind turbine things. You know, they get whenever there's a gale in wintertime, they get knocked down and they get overloaded and blow up. And sometimes even UFOs hit them. I don't know if you remember that. Up in the Lincolnshire Triangle, we had a big UFO event and UFOs got hit. The sun's still quite low. It's quite early in the morning actually, because I came out early because it was dark when I left, and if I'd been filming, it would have been another Slaxer Noir. But so basically, there's a good shot of the laboratory. I'm in the shade, and there's a good shot of the Culham laboratory. You go to Google Maps, you'll be able to see it just by the railway. It's just directly east of that railway leading between Oxford and Didcot. Can't miss it. It's a big place. Now, and of course, I mean, a lot of people often point this out. I mean, that spindly little twit has said so himself. You know, you can't, it's simply not efficient enough. Solar power, wind power, it's simply not efficient. You can't run civilization off it. You can top it up, what we already have. You can't run it. So that's the downside of winds and solar power. Now we often say, well, obviously the solution is to find an energy that doesn't cost anything to generate. It has very low overheads in terms of how you in terms of the generation process. In other words, it's simple, low maintenance. It is clean and safe. There's no side effects in terms of toxic waste, in terms of dangerous processes and dangerous activities in order to obtain it, and that it's infinite and you basically will never run out. That's what you ideally need. And you often see these programs like BBC Horizon. Oh God, don't get me started on the BBC again, please. You get BBC Horizon and these other programs saying, if only we could find it. If only we could find it, wouldn't that be wonderful? You know, so what if I was to tell you we have found it? What if I was to tell you it does exist? Now, this is actually the dream of the people who run this place, the CCFE. I'm determined. I've got to find out what that bloody stands for. I know it's something fusion energy. Maybe I can work it out. The Centre for Fusion Energy. Oh, shit. Sorry, I'll let you guys down because I fluffed that thing because I didn't write it in my notes. I was researching last night and reading up on it till 1 o'clock in the bloody morning, and I can't even remember the name of the place. Sorry about that. Culham Adventure Park. Ooh, are we going to have an adventure today? I hope so. Anyway, what if we've already got it? What if it already exists? In which case, this, which has a budget of billions, because it was built in the late 70s and early 80s at a cost of billions of pounds. What if we've already got it? What if this is a waste of time? Oh, it's very interesting what they're doing. I mean, I don't get me wrong. You know, I'm interested in what they're up to. But now, before I go on to explain how we've already got it, I'll explain how this works. Now, this here is a laboratory. It's not a power station. It's a laboratory researching a new form of nuclear energy called nuclear fusion. Now, I was telling you before about nuclear power stations. Like, nuclear fission is what I was talking about before. This is where you have rods of heavy metal with unstable atoms. The atoms split, the particles fly off, the nucleus splits open, hence the name nuclear. The particles fly into other nuclei, those split off. It's basically like a chain reaction. It's like dropping dominoes. That's how it works, and I've already described the disadvantages of that. It's not even infinite. I mean, uranium is actually going to run out even before fossil fuels do. You know, and obviously with a radioactive substance, there's lots of dangers in that. There's the Culham Adventure Park. Wow. No, I think life's exciting enough without having more adventures down there. You know. Anyway, now this laboratory deals with something very different: nuclear fusion. And nuclear fusion is where you get atoms of hydrogen, which is it's the simplest atom of all, just single proton, simple electron around it, and you fuse them together. Now, of course, it's a very difficult thing to do because they repel each other. I mean, it's schoolboy science, that, you know. Everyone knows that they're positively charged. They attract the electrons. They repel each other. They have an opposite electric charge. And in electricity, opposites do not attract. They repel. No, sorry, it's the other way around. Opposites attract, that's it. Homopolar things. It's homopole. It's homopolar. They repel, that's it. Funny thing is, you know, you probably noticed this. Those wires up there, those national grid wires, are making a kind of crackling sound. It sounds like bacon frying. Strange. Now, so the only way you could make atoms of hydrogen fuse together is to basically, you have to heat them up to enormous temperatures. And this happens in nature. The sun is a huge fusion reactor because there's enormous pressures and temperatures in the heart of the sun, which cause nuclear fusion. Now, you can't produce the pressures like that on Earth, but you can produce the temperatures, and that's what that does. That laboratory does that. And how do they do that? Well, you use a device called a tokamak to produce this plasma, and that's what it's called, plasma. Plasma, when these atoms start flying apart and the nuclei collide and they fuse, it's called a plasma, and that's what's at the centre of the sun. Now, if you can get the gas hot enough, to a hot enough temperature of about 100 million degrees, because it's lower pressure than the sun, you have to heat it up even hotter than the sun. The sun's about 20 million degrees. You have to heat up the gas in the tokamak to 100 million degrees to get it to fuse. And once you've done that, you can produce energy. And they have had some success with doing that. They've managed to produce enough. They're just about broken even at this place. That's very, very good. The sun over the Culham laboratory. That's a very, very good little manto there. Good little portrait. The sun, the natural fusion over the artificial fusion. I like that. That's a good shot. Good little portrait of what I want to say. Now, a tokamak, I mean, something like that, you know, something that hot, that's 100 million degrees, right? You can't use any kind of container for it. You have to suspend it in a magnetic field, as you know, rather like you get these sort of magnetic levitation trains and things like that. You have to suspend it in a magnetic field. Now, of course, you know, like this is where I got a bit concerned, because I thought, well, that hot, you know, that kind of temperature, all right, it's hundreds of millions of degrees, and they've got it in a magnetic field. And what they do is they have a big ring of magnets. It's like a donut-shaped thing, a torus. And inside that, they put this gas of a type of hydrogen isotope called deuterium. And they put that in there, and they get it to fuse together to form tritium and then helium. It's like a three-stage process. Oh, look at those little sheep. Hello, sheepy. Don't worry, I won't hurt you. I know I'm a Welsh boy, but I'm not in the mood. And you suspend it in a magnetic field. Now, I got a bit worried. I actually wrote to them, and I said to them, you know, isn't it dangerous to have a gas at that heat, hundreds of millions of degrees? I mean, water boils at 100 degrees. We're talking about, you know, some metals melt at about 1,000. Most metals do. This is 1,000 times hotter. It's a million degrees. It's 100 million degrees. That's pretty hot. I mean, I'll just vaporise everything it touched. And they replied, don't worry, because the density of the gas is very low. This is an important point to remember. What would happen is if the magnets, for instance, on the tokamak failed and the gas leaked out, all that would happen is it would touch the side. The moment it touched the sides of the machine, it would actually immediately cool down. It might scorch them a little bit, but it wouldn't do any harm. And the reason is because it's very, very thin. The gas that goes in there is the actual interior of the tokamak is almost a vacuum. It contains 1/100th of a gram of deuterium. Now, 1/100th of a gram is about the weight of a postage stamp, and that's in a gas, and it's basically dumped. It's spread out in this entire area, which is about hundreds of cubic feet. So you can imagine, you can see how that is not dense at all. And the thing about heat is, you know, the damage heat can do is not just dependent on the amount of heat you have, the temperature. It's dependent on the density, because this is why water, hot water, boiling water can actually burn you much worse than a flame. If you put your hand in a flame, you'll get burned quite nastily. But if you put it in boiling water, it'll get even worse. The boiling water's cooler. I mean, the flame maybe a few hundred degrees. Boiling water's only 100 degrees. But the fact that water is much more dense, it's 40 times denser than air. It'll do a lot more damage to your skin. If anyone ever offers you with a choice, put your hand in boiling water or put your hand in a flame, choose the flame. So I mean, if this gas is very, very thin gas at high temperature, it wouldn't actually do any harm. And I wrote to them. I said, look, I live near the CCFE, and if this gas escaped, am I in any danger? Could it burn people? Could it set fire to things? And they said, no, don't worry. Don't worry about that. If the magnets failed, it wouldn't do any harm. And they're working very, very hard on this. I mean, they're building it's a huge project they're building this. I'll just go around here and make a seat from the other side. It's a huge project. Like I said, it costs billions, and they've invested vast amounts of money over 30 years now in their project. And, well, the progress has been slow. It's got to be said. Now, they're just about to they're in the process of building a new laboratory, which is similar to this one, but far more advanced. Far more, it's got a much bigger tokamak. It's much more powerful. It has a huger tokamak. It's much easier to run a bigger tokamak because there's more space for you. You're apparently having more space to keep the fuel burning. It makes it easier. It's like having a big fire is easier to fuel than a little fire. You can stoke a big bonfire quite easily, but keeping a little match alight is extremely. If you try to keep a match alight, it's extremely difficult. So we've got a great big tokamak at this place. It's a place called Cadarache in France, and it's called ITER, I-T-E-R. Now, I have made a note of what that stands for. It stands for the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor. Now, that is what it is. It's like the CCFE here, but it's much more ambitious, and it's hopefully be running in 2020. That's the hope. It's a massive international project. It's not just the French involved. There's Russia, China, Japan, India, USA, European Union. It's a massive international project. And there's a new kind of tokamak. It's not a donut shaped. It's not a torus. It's actually a sphere. It's a big bottle with like it's a kind of like a big spherical bottle chamber, big spherical chamber, and it's actually 800 cubic meters. So it's bigger than this one. This one is small. I can't remember how many cubic meters it was, but it's 800. Now, I've got to actually apologise here for a mistake I made in Freikraft. What I said was that I told you that that nuclear fusion could never work because you couldn't find a heat exchanger for it. Well, that's actually not true, because the neutron emissions from the fusion reaction could apparently be used to heat a boiler in the same way that all other conventional power stations do, nuclear, fission or coal. You can heat a boiler with that, and that's basically the heat exchanger they would use, would be the neutron emissions from the reactor. And it's perfectly safe, actually. There's no radiation risk from these neutron emissions as there would be in a fission reactor. So it can be run safely, and the byproducts, the helium, tritium byproducts, cannot be made into weapons either, and they don't need to be stored for millions of years. So that's the advantages of it. Now, I should apologise, right, because I said that no heat exchanger could deal with a gas that hot. And of course, I was thinking of, surface density. That would be true, but in the case of very thin density, you get much less heat. I don't know if it's half the heat, depending on the half the density, or whether it's some kind of inverse square law. I don't know. If any of you are physicists, you can tell me. But you get much lower heat emissions, which are fueled from the nuclear fusion reactor. There we are. There it is. Inside there is the tokamak. Inside there they have a machine which is running at 100 million degrees centigrade in that machine there. I'll carry on now. I don't think we're going to get. Oh, this is a good shot. I don't know if you can see it. This is a wonderful shot actually. It's a shame those trees in the distance get in the way. We have here the Culham Laboratories, and there, Didcot Power Station in the distance. You can just make out, there's the chimney, and you can just make out a cooling tower, I think. I'll just get above there. The fence is fucking up the focus, excuse my language. Let's see if I can get past the fence, because... That's it, there we are. That's it. You see the emissions from the cooling tower there. Brilliant shot, that. Brilliant shot. Now, ITER is going to be a more advanced project. Now, what they reckon they're able to do is, with ITER, they're able to get a sustained reaction from the ITER reactor, the tokamak in there, which will be able to produce a steady flow of energy. Now, if that works, the next step is they're going to build an actual power station in France, near ITER, and charge the French national grid. And hopefully they're hoping then the idea will catch on and you'll have fusion reactors all over the world. And we have energy utopia, apparently. We'll see. That's the theory. They reckon it won't be for at least another 50 years. That's a long time. Old, that spindly little twit, George Monbiot, is going to be absolutely pulling his hair out, because he'll say, by then it will be too late. By then, carbon emissions will have destroyed the Earth and the polar caps will be melted. And the Maldive Islands will be submerged. Well, that's what he would say. So basically it's going to take a long time. And so this is, I say, progress is slow, it's expensive. The ITER project was going to cost £10 billion. This cost almost as much to build. Well, you'd be interested to know that this organisation, the CCFE, I better when I go there, I better remember it soon, because I'm going there. Yep, I'm going to the CCFE for one of their open evenings. They run free tours every so often on open evenings, and they only a few a year. So I'm not going till May the 15th. There's one on May the 15th which I'm booked onto. I've written to them, and I've booked onto it. So on May the 15th, I'm going to go there and go to one of their open evenings and see the facility for myself. Should be good. Mind you, if any of them are watching this film, they may think, we don't want this loony with us, especially with what I'm going to say next. But I'm actually going to, well, I want to say actually to them, if they're watching, you don't have to worry, okay, I'm very well behaved, I'm very civilised, I won't make any trouble, alright, I won't even ask any awkward questions. I just want to go in there and see the thing and see what it's like, okay, I'll be perfect gentleman. In fact, anyone who goes to Skeptics in the Pub will know that I often attend Skeptics in the Pub. In fact, I'm going to one tomorrow night, and I'm always very well behaved there, and they're very welcoming to me. So for the staff at the CCFE, don't worry, all right, you're not letting an illicit some kind of illicit fanatic into your midst who's going to ruin everything and spoil everybody's night. No, I'm not, okay, I promise. So hopefully they'll take that on board, and I'll be joining the tour on the 15th of May in a few months. It's 6 months away, so I've got plenty of time to prepare, but I will let you know how I get on. Right. So, will this work or not? Now, it's 50 years, plenty of time, and now, free energy. Now, I don't need to go into too much details about this, because a lot of you are familiar with this. I've spoken about a lot of this before. We have free energy. Oh look, a black helicopter. He's keeping an eye on me. You see that? There he is. He's watching me. He's come to watch me, yeah. I think that's actually a military one. Now, as I was saying, I don't think I really need to go into this in too much detail. We all know, you've probably gone to the various free energy websites, the Hutchison effect, you know, various other things such as Victor Schauberger, John Searle, and the Searle effect, the Hutchison effect. Eugene Maloff, cold fusion. You probably are aware of all these things. The various perpetual motion machines, Keeley, KeelyNet, there's a good website, KeelyNet, and check the evidence, Andrew Johnson's website. This is a good DVD I recommend actually, the free energy cover-up. There's several different, it runs on Heavy Watergate, Wilhelm Reich, free energy inventions. There's various, it's a compilation, very, very interesting stuff on there. So I do recommend that. You can get it from Andrew Johnson's checktheevidence website.com. Alright. Andrew, that'll be 20 quid please. Now, anti-gravity as well. I mean, Andrew talks about this as well. A lot of other people talk about anti-gravity. We have anti-gravity. Once you have anti-gravity, you have free energy. Because there's any number of different ways of, you know, generating electricity from anti-gravity. You can just switch on an anti-gravity field, it goes up, attach it to and it goes down, up and down, and you could just basically run a dynamo off that, couldn't you? You could attach it to a chain and a cog, run a dynamo. Simple thing, you do one at home. Basically, we have free energy. Now, why are we not using it? Why is this massive, expensive laboratory built here? Why is it here? I must say it's a much more pleasant site than Didcot Power Station. It's a bit more picturesque, looks nicer, but it's still very expensive, it's very big, it's very obtrusive. Why is it here? And pleasant to the eye is not something you can say about the Didcot Power Station there in the distance. That's an even better shot because you can see the cooling towers. Why is that there? Why are we using coal to burn something that's been done since the Stone Age? We've been getting heat and energy from coal for thousands of years. Why are we using Stone Age technology to generate electricity in the space age? Now, the reason is, of course, it's a conspiracy. Yes, it is. You knew I was going to say that, didn't you? It is a conspiracy, yes. It is a conspiracy to cover it up. And it's been covered up through a very, very far-reaching, very dedicated, very sophisticated, sometimes violent, sometimes subtle cover-up. On one level, it's about money. I mean, there are people involved in the free energy cover-up who are not malicious. They don't have malicious intent as such. They're just very greedy, and they just like being rich and powerful, and they just want more and more possessions. They're materialistic. I mean, why people are like that, that's a big subject we could talk about another time. But basically, some people are like that. Now, that's one level. I mean, you know, and what they're going to do. I mean, you can you imagine going up to the chairman of an oil company and saying, "Oh, Mr. Sir, what's his name, Chairman of Royal Dutch Shell, just to let you know, mate, your services are no longer required." All right. What's he going to say? Oh, all right, then I'll do something else. Let's see. Well, you still need oil to make candles, don't you? So, shall we bring out a range of Shell candles? That's right, Shell candles. We can make them all kinds of colours and lovely shapes, and it's very, very good wax as well. You know, it won't stain your wallpaper, and it smells nice. We'll put little scents into them. Shell candles. You know, we're going to put a little shell mark on them and sell them. Now that's going to be a money spinner, isn't it? I don't think so. Do you? Fossil fuels, right? They're not just a business. They are business. The use of fossil fuels is absolutely inimical to the current world order. On one level, it's financial. Like I just said, greedy people probably know that free energy is possible, but they're covering it up. A lot of the times, it's because people know that they need fossil fuels. Like I said, they cost money, but they also make us dependent. They make us dependent on the national grid, on the power stations, and also the oil companies, and everything else like that, and ultimately the state. Because the corporatocracy is the same thing as the state in this world. It makes us dependent, and it means that we need them. Without them, we go, you know, our electricity's cut off basically, and our cars don't work. And everything else doesn't work, everything grinds to a halt. It is the fuel of civilization. It's the lubricant of civilization. And it's inimical, and without free energy, with everyone having an infinite amount of energy in their very hands to use with as much as they like, India and China would take over the world with their huge populations, their massive resources, their booming economies. They would dominate the world. The world order of the West and the Third World would be over, because poverty would be eliminated. And I personally think eliminating poverty would be a wonderful thing. But the rulers of this world think otherwise. And of course they're aiming for their new world order. The world order we have now, they don't want. It's unstable. They know that, they know that people at the moment don't like to be controlled. Deep down none of us want to be controlled. They know that deep down all of us are rebelling against it, and more of us are going to rebel against it. They know that the current world order is unstable, and they could lose their power at any moment. So they're going for the new world order. But just imagine what it would mean, right? To have free energy. You have to stop and think, and just ponder for a moment the implications, the actual implications of what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a box in your house, right? That costs £200. As I was saying before, technically that's not free, is it? Because you pay £200. But I mean, it's ultra cheap energy, so it's virtually free. You pay £200. And you put a box that can fit into a cupboard in your house. It's about a square foot high. A square foot. These devices actually have been invented. It's a square foot. It has no moving parts, and it's very simple. So it's very, very low maintenance. Doesn't need oiling. Doesn't need the mechanic. You don't need to call the mechanic in. You don't need to change the battery. You don't need to wipe the spark plugs. It's basically, you fit it in there. You switch it on, and it provides enough energy for your house forever. And it is free, and it is clean, and it is infinite. It gets its energy out of the very fabric of space. That is the 0 point field. That is, even when there's no heat energy at all, no molecular motion, absolute zero. This energy still exists. That's what's called 0 point energy. You have to stop and pause for a moment and think what that means, the implications of that. You have to stop and pause and think, what if you could build a car, which you could put a device in, but you could drive it around the world without stopping. You wouldn't need to stop for petrol or anything. You just drive. You can go where you want. Now, as far as anti-gravity goes, I mean, anti-gravity, free energy, the cover-ups are the same, because I say that anti-gravity is free energy is anti-gravity. You could build a house that could float, and you could just fly it wherever you wanted. You wouldn't need to stay in one place. You could put it on a free energy pad. You could say, I feel like going to the Amazon jungle today. So you just program the computer to fly the house to the Amazon jungle, and you can just sit at a water hole for a while and watch the marmosets play around. Have dinner with an Indian, and maybe go to an ayahuasca session, things like that. You know what I'm talking about? There'll be no environment. It would solve most of the problems that face the world will be solved. Most of the problems that face the world now are social, environmental. Civilization itself has become the central problem of this planet, as Michael Wood says, the famous historian. Those problems would be solved completely, totally and utterly. There'll be no poverty, there'll be no starvation, because a lot of poverty and starvation is often caused by lack of water, usually through some war or something that breaks out and stops people getting access to it. But you'd be able to desalinate seawater, and this would solve the problem of cities gobbling up all the water, like in places like Israel, where all the big cities are drowning, drying up the River Jordan, and the Dead Sea is drying up and things like that. That wouldn't happen either. Look at that. There it is again from another angle. We come all the way around it. You could, because desalination can be done. It's very easy to do. Anyone can do it, but it costs money. It needs energy. Now, with free energy, you could basically, you wouldn't. The energy problem would be solved because you could just use free energy devices to run the power for the desalination plants. You desalinate seawater, you pump it inland. There's a virtually infinite supply of water in the sea. The only reason there are water shortages is because we have to use fresh water. You desalinate the water, purify it, turn it into drinking water, turn it into irrigation water, and you pump it inland. You don't have to pay to pump it in. You can carry it by anti-gravity craft, or you could pump it in a Schauberger coil inland to wherever you want it, into the middle of the Sahara Desert, and you could create farmland there. And with other things such as ormus and terra preta, these very, very powerful organic fertilizers, you know, which have been suppressed, and you know, you wouldn't need harsh chemicals on the land. You could actually have, a farmland. You could have farmland. You could have a window box. You know, you could. What I'm saying. Sorry, I'll backtrack. What I'm saying is that terra preta and ormus and monatomic gold and things like that, they would increase the yield of farmland many-fold. They would make the ground hyper-fertile, and that would, you know, and what's more, it wouldn't be like the chemicals they put on the land today, the artificial chemicals, which eventually break down the soil and destroy the land. These would enrich the land. These are organic, natural fertilizers. Basically what it means is that we have a farmer's field here growing crops. You could get 10 times as much crops out of this field as you would without ormus or terra preta, which means you could actually have smaller farms, more room for the wilderness, more room for nature. You could build farms where you wouldn't be able to normally, with hydroponic things, and you know, hydroponic plants, hydroponic sort of like greenhouses, things like that. And basically, you could get a window box, and you could feed your family from. You could feed your family from it. You could feed your family from a window box if you use terra preta or ormus. All right, but that's kind of another matter. It's related to the free energy, but you know, like I said, it's another part of this, so I'm digressing slightly. The free energy issue would be enough to, I mean, you could create so much turn so much arid, broken land into farmland. You could solve that problem of poverty. I mean, incidentally, you know, I mean, honestly, I think as far as the third world goes, incidentally, I digress again, you know, simply eliminating the debts, the national debts of countries, the war, you know, getting rid of all the landmines on the farmland. There's millions of acres of farmland in Africa is now covered in landmines. Just doing that, you know, would probably solve all their problems, even without the free energy. But here in Britain, you know, there'd be no more sitting around in your sleeping bags, you know, saving your pennies to put in the meter, which is what we do now. We just basically have everything we needed. We wouldn't even need double glazing, because we could, you know, it wouldn't be anything wrong with waste. You know, you could have thinner windows, and it wouldn't matter if your house leaks out a little bit of heat. And these awful situations which inspired Gary McKinnon to do what he did. Old people dying of cold in winter because they can't afford the heating bills. That'll be over. I mean, it's a terrible thing that in a country like ours this happens, but it does. It happens every winter. And this is what I say, it's inspired Gary McKinnon to do what he did, to hack into these computers because he was looking for secrets about UFOs. That's what free energy would mean for us. Now, why don't we have it? Because the New World Order would be impossible in such a society. It would be impossible. I'm going to go back now. The New World Order would not function because, like I said, the New World Order means creating the current world order. They understand, even those not initiated into the New World Order, understand that they need to keep the people dependent on the system. Well, the New World Order will want to make people even more dependent, increase dependency on the system. So, basically, if we have free energy, the New World Order's over. These two things are mutually contradictory and mutually exclusive. One cannot exist without the other. Simple as that. If the day ever comes when we have free energy, you'll know that they've given up on the New World Order. And I don't think they're going to give up. They're not going to go quietly. Look at that. That's a bird. Look, I think that's a kite or bird of prey of some kind. Beautiful. Oh, look at him. I tell you what, I was actually walking through Oxford a few months ago, and I came across this bird. Yeah, I was walking through Gloucester Green in Oxford. If you know that area, you'll know that it's full of pigeons normally, trying to pick up crumbs from the cafes and things like that. Not a pigeon to be seen. And I thought, this is weird. Where have all the pigeons gone? took me a moment to realise that they weren't there, and that's what was weird about the place. I looked up on top of the cinema in George Street, at the George Street Cinema. Sitting on top of the signboard was the biggest, meanest looking hawk I've ever seen. I asked someone who knew about birds and they said it was a buzzard. Right. But that explains where the pigeons went. They took one look at that thing and they scarpered. So I'm completely losing my train of thought now. I'm getting like Slaxer and going off onto a tangent. So that's why we don't have free energy. That's why they cover it up. That's why this technology is covered up. And this is why I think, not only, you know, this is why I think having the Culham laboratories and Didcot power stations so close to each other is an interesting contradiction. It's an interesting kind of, like, as I explained before, it's a very apt kind of irony. And the irony actually comes from the fact that this whole thing is not necessary. It's a big white elephant. I mean, it's interesting what they're doing, and I want to see more. I want to know more because I'm just interested in the science of it. And this is why I'm going to the open evening. I'm not going there to cause trouble, as I said. I'm going there to get information. There's the irony is that you have the laboratory, which is there, in a sense, I mean, by investing so much money into this technological cul-de-sac, it aids the free energy cover-up. And on the other hand, you have Didcot Power Station over there, which you can just see through the trees, which is the product. So you have the con, and you have the product of the con. I thought that was a very, very interesting irony. So now, as you know, I'm this is what basically, free energy inventors. I've been talking about them before. John Searle, people like him. Now he's alive. He's an old man, but I met him in 2010 at the Exit Politics conference. He's quite a rarity actually, because he's actually still alive. Free energy inventors have a nasty habit of coming across accidents or illnesses that lead to premature deaths. Of course, the skeptics will say, that's just a coincidence. And of course, you can always say something's a coincidence. You can't disprove a coincidence. This is why they always use that get-out-of-jail-free card. It's a coincidence, Ben! Well, I don't think it is. And the skeptics, incidentally, I mean, one of the things, the skeptics who don't believe what I'm saying, they say, there's no free energy cover-up, Ben. If we had free energy, they'd all use it tomorrow. And I said, well, no, why is that? And he says, whoever invented free energy would be enormously rich. Just think what they could do. If they patented their product and they sold their free energy to everyone. And I said, this shows a complete ignorance of energy economics, right? You can't sell free energy. This is what this is. In that DVD I showed you, one of the programs called It Runs on Water. I had an interview with a guy who said, you can either do science or you can do business. And then these guys can either do the science or they can just sell the free energy. But they don't want to sell the free energy. The thing is, it's just a complete misnomer to say you can sell free energy. If you had a free energy device, you start charging people for it, they're going to get stroppy. It's as ridiculous as having a sailing boat, a sailing yacht or something, you know the ones with the sails, no engine. You put an anemometer on it, that's a device for measuring wind speed. You attach the anemometer to a meter and you charge the skipper for the wind he uses. That's how ridiculous it is. So I say free energy inventors have a nasty habit of dying young. Either that or they get corrupted. Now there's a lot of... See, what happens is, it's very often, if you patent your device, you have a free energy perpetual motion device, you patent it, you get a knock on your door and these guys in suits come in and make you an offer you can't refuse. Very often a rich philanthropist would want to do a development contract with you and ask sometimes to buy the patent. Very often they just ask for licensing. They ask you to license the patent. A development contract, that's all it is. We don't mean we're not going to take your invention off you. It's a development contract. But it varies with their small print. That means that they have more power than they're letting on. This rich philanthropist basically takes possession of your invention and says, right, well, thanks for bringing this to... We'll get back to you and letting you know how we're getting on. And basically it goes into a black hole vault somewhere, a black vault, and you never see it again. And a lot of, maybe there's in some ways there's corruption in terms of people like Stephen E. Jones. Now, Andrew Johnson talks about Stephen E. Jones. Now, he's a guy who's involved in free energy. He was involved in nuclear cold fusion. But I hope this is a test of the windshield, I'll tell you. But I mean, as Andrew said, when he got involved with the cold fusion thing, that's what buried it. Stephen E. Thermite Jones, the guy who's now involved in 9/11 research and trying to put people off looking at Dr. Judy Wood's work, was involved in the free energy thing, in the cold fusion matter. Now, cold fusion, I mean, I'll go into that in a minute, but basically that's what will happen. You'll get bright. You think about a lot of these inventions, these free energy inventions, and these perpetual motion machines are invented by people who are amateur inventors, working in their garden sheds late at night, pissing off their wives, not spending time with the kids, married to a machine. Now, most of these people come from the United States, and that is a country with a great tradition in amateur inventors, and you know, people like Thomas Edison and the Wright brothers made enormous progress that way. The wind's getting. I think you'll be all right now because the windshield is. I've tested this windshield and it does work. Basically, what will happen then is, if you're a bit wise to them and you don't agree to their deals, very often you might find yourself being threatened. This happened to several people, including the man who with the car runs on water. That's in that DVD as well. And then you have eventually you meet with some kind of illness or accident that ends your life. A good example is Dr. Eugene Maloff, one of the supporters of Fleischmann and Pons in their cold fusion experiment. What happened to him? He was in a restaurant one day. He said, "They poisoned me," and he died. Of course, he was. Official reports said he just swallowed a chicken bone or something ridiculous like that. I don't know. Basically, the point is, like, if you have a free energy invention, right, don't patent it. Don't go through the normal channels. Go to people like Andrew. Go to people who are clued, who are conspiratorially aware. And you've also got to watch out for controlled opposition, because there's certain people involved who I wouldn't trust. I wouldn't trust Dr. Stephen Greer. I don't trust him with anything, actually. I don't trust him over UFOs. I'm going to talk about UFOs as well in a moment. Dr. Stephen Greer has an invention called SEAS. There's something energy, something or other. He has various organisations with very sibilant little names, and this is one of them. Now, don't trust them. Go to someone like Andrew, or even you can contact me if you like. I'll put you in touch with somebody. If you have a free energy or perpetual motion invention, come to me. I'm putting myself up as an intermediary. I will put you in the right direction of someone who can help. And I promise you there'll be somebody decent, somebody trustworthy. Now, disclosure, you see. Now, disclosure is intimately attached to UFOs, because as all the ex-politicians say, energy is a factor, because UFOs, well, we still don't know exactly what UFOs are, but there's one thing for certain. When they're flying through space or transiting time-dimensional, spatial dimensional portals, they're not doing it on Texaco unleaded 4-star. They use some kind of esoteric propulsion system, and the fact that they're not aerofoil means it has an anti-gravity property. So they have a free energy and anti-gravity propulsion system and power plant. So UFOs, whatever they are inimical to the free energy issue. As I've said before, you know, the exopolitics movement, I mean, I go to the exopolitics conferences, you know that. You've seen my videos I make there, like the Disclosure City people. I want to go to the one next year, if there is one. But you know that I've often said before, you know, willing disclosure is impossible. And willing disclosure is that you write to your MP enough times, you camp outside the White House, and sooner or later you're going to get Obama or Cameron sitting in front of their desk in the White House, in the Oval Office, and Obama's going to sit there, or whoever's president or prime minister of Britain, would be the same thing, and they're going to say, "My fellow Americans, UFOs are real. We've known about it for almost a century." And they'll say they have to admit to Roswell, they have to admit to it. They can't just do it a little bit, they have to admit to everything. If they're going to admit to it, they're going to have to admit to everything. We've known about it all this time, but we didn't tell you. Sorry? Sorry? Do you understand the level? It would be the world's biggest confession. You can never admit to something like that. It's too big. You can't admit that you were in power, you had secrets, and you kept it from the people. A secret that big. Because everyone watching that TV broadcast will be listing all of human history for the last 80 years, and they'll be thinking about how different it would have been if we had had this energy system. All the poverty, all the environmental destruction, it wouldn't have happened. All these wars for oil, they wouldn't have happened. All the millions and billions, a billion people or more, dead because they didn't have water, because they didn't have energy, because they didn't have food. All these old ladies, as I said, all these old folks freezing to death in their houses every winter. It wouldn't have happened. It's not. I mean, it's not. It's worse. It puts confessing to a murder. I mean, it's even if Obama set up and said, "By the way, I'm the Boston Strangler. I'm a serial killer. I slaughtered 100 old ladies and I put their heads on a stick." That wouldn't even come close to it. He's admitting he put half the human race on a stick. All of us in some way, because all of us are affected, whether we're directly affected or not, by this. There'll never ever be willing disclosure. If there's willing disclosure, the civilization will fall. It's one of these secrets that's too big to be told. Secrets that are beyond secret. And we've had an example of that recently. We had, in 1989, we had the cold fusion fiasco, right? As I've just explained to you, fusion is what they're doing there at very high temperatures. Cold fusion, by its definition, is something that happens at a cold temperature rather than the 100 million degrees that they use in that thing. And what it was, it's two scientists called Stanley Pons and Martin Fleischmann did an experiment in Newcastle, where Fleischmann was a professor of chemistry at Newcastle University, which produced nuclear fusion at a much lower temperature. Now if you look at the description box, you'll see that I've got a link to my video, Martin Fleischmann Dies, and I go into it in more detail there, exactly about Martin Fleischmann and Stanley Pons and what they did. But basically, they were doing a chemistry experiment using deuterium. They had a test tube of deuterium and put these cathodes in it, and they ran an electric current through it, hoping to get some kind of chemical reaction, which is what electrolysis is. I mean, it's not large hadron collider material. This is schoolboy science. We've all done it if we went to school. You know, you have it's electrolysis. It's the simplest thing in the world. What happened was they got products that couldn't have come from any chemical reaction. As a result, they actually picked up byproducts, and what's more, there was an enormous amount of heat. The thing boiled, it glowed. I mean, you can see it. And this is why some people call it the anomalous heat effect, which is probably a better word, because there's no evidence that the evidence for nuclear fusion itself is very low, though it's still present. I mean, I'm happy to be proved wrong on that very easily, but the point of it is that the heat was there. Now, if the heat's there, you can rig it up, like I said, you can rig it up to a heat exchanger, a boiler. You run the boiler can spin a turbine, the turbine can spin a dynamo, and you've got energy. But basically, there was a massive media furore for about a week, I remember, as these scientists announced their results. Now, they had the good sense not to go through the normal scientific channels, and they actually went straight to the media. They've been criticised for that, but I think it was a good thing. If they'd gone to try and get their papers published in a normal scientific journal, it wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't even know about it now. Because this is not the first time the anomalous heat effect has been observed. In fact, Pons and Fleischmann weren't the first people to do that experiment. It was first done in 1926, and the anomalous heat effect was observed. But the difference with Pons and Fleischmann is it got into the media. So basically, then a week later, there was a scientific committee involving Stephen E. Jones stood up and said, no, there's nothing there. It was all a big mistake. I'm afraid they cocked up. Well, Pons and Fleischmann's career was over, and it basically was forgotten about. Basically. But I've got how much? 8 minutes on the battery. This is actually this is the longest film I've ever done, actually. But it was not forgotten by me or by lots of other people. We didn't forget about it. There's these National Grid again, and there's been some absolutely terrible, abysmal documentaries about Pons and Fleischmann coming out of BBC Horizon and places like that. Absolutely appalling. Like, you know, like the Experiment to Save the World, which is an appalling documentary about Russi Talyakin. Russi Talyakin is another scientist who claims to have created nuclear fusion at cold temperatures using sound waves just using sound waves. Well, they basically did a hit piece on it at the BBC. You know, I mean, I knew as soon as they made the programme, they intended to repeat the experiment, but it was all a big hit piece, and they included a little piece on Pons and Fleischmann in it, which shows it was a hit piece. So this is why I do urge you to watch these programmes, but don't believe what's in them. Understand they're lying to you. Who was I? Now, the whole basis was on neutron detection, right? Nuclear fusion produces neutrons, and the whole issue was to do with how much neutrons were picked up. Now, the thing about it is, like, should that be the only measurement? Should that be the only way of analysing the data? Simply neutron emission, because according to them, neutrons weren't picked up above the background level. Same with Pons and Fleischmann. Should that be the only method we use? What about heat? What about measuring heat? If you measure heat coming out of the experiment, heat is produced by the process. It's too much for any chemical reaction could possibly produce. Then there's something else going on. It may not be conventional nuclear fusion, but it's something else. This is the question I'm asking. That's a question these people that I've been asking, but these people are very much against Pons and Fleischmann, probably because it will put them out of business. You wouldn't need this £10 billion. I was going to say it's not a monstrosity, it's quite a nice building, but you wouldn't need it. That money could be spent on other things. Now, I've only got a few minutes on the battery. This is the longest movie I've ever done. Now, it's every few years this is regurgitated up again, and some people come forward and say, we think we can make this work. You know, I mean, the free energy cover-up goes back from beyond Roswell. It's older than the modern UFO era. It dates back to, Nikola Tesla. I mean, some of Nikola Tesla's papers are still classified